All right, so we talked about that we did mention that the red blood vessels are very anteriorly located. That's why we can see them clearly. The orange ones represent the ones that are moving posteriorly, okay, or the ones that we cannot see clearly. So here we have the cannot change color. So right here, this is the left coronary artery, and along here, this one is the right coronary artery. Okay, so the left coronary artery, as we see, divides into two branches, right? The first branch, which runs like this, is called the anterior interventricular artery, and this runs along the anterior interventricular sulcus. So this artery sits on the anterior interventricular sulcus, and the other branch is called the circumflex artery, which runs like that. If you look at the left coronary artery, it moves posteriorly. Do you see the posterior orange part? And it forms the posterior interventricular artery. And also right here, this is the right marginal artery. Okay, so let's do it one more time. So we are looking at the arteries of the heart. Two arteries. We have the right coronary artery and we have the left coronary artery. The left coronary artery divides into anterior interventricular artery and which one? Circumflex artery. The right one divides into posterior interventricular artery and right marginal artery. The anterior interventricular artery sits in the anterior interventricular sulcus. The posterior interventricular artery sits within the posterior interventricular sulcus. Hope that makes sense. So these are the right and left coronary arteries. The right coronary artery divides into posterior interventricular artery and right marginal artery. The left coronary artery divides into circumflex and anterior interventricular arteries. Looking into the veins, there are three major veins that drain the heart, and these are the great cardiac vein as shown by the black line. Then we also see the small cardiac vein, and also we have a middle cardiac vein which is posteriorly located, and that is why it is represented by the faint blue color. So great cardiac vein, small cardiac vein and middle cardiac vein. These three veins carry deoxygenated blood from the wall of the heart and dump it into a bigger vein. You see this big thick vein posteriorly? This is called coronary sinus. So deoxygenated blood from the wall of the heart is carried by three veins: great cardiac vein, middle cardiac vein and small cardiac vein. They come together and drain the deoxygenated blood into a thicker vessel called coronary sinus, and the coronary sinus sits in the coronary sulcus. It sits on the coronary sulcus. Remember, sulcus is the depression. Okay. Moving on to electrical conduction system of the heart. Again, you see my alien heart. And looking at this heart, we see the upper two chambers. We see the right atrium, we see the left atrium, we see the right ventricle, and we see the left ventricle. We also see the fibrous what is this called? The fibrous segment? No. This is the, oh, fibrous skeleton. My bad, sometimes. We also see the fibrous skeleton. Oh, I actually labeled it here. Okay. Okay, so these are the 4 chambers, and we also see the fibrous skeleton here. Now we see a bunch of things in yellow, right? Let's talk about it. Now, few things I want you to know. The heart can generate its own beat, and that is why it is called autorhythmic. Man. It is called autorhythmic, meaning it can generate its own beat. Okay. So heart doesn't need stimulation from the nervous system to start beating. Okay, if it can generate its own beat without any influence of the nervous system, without any input from the nervous system, and that is why it is called autorhythmic. Alright, now there are specific cells in the heart that help in generation of this rhythmicity of the heart, and those specialized cells are found in the SA node or sinoatrial node or pacemaker of the heart, shown by the yellow knob-like structure on the superior part of the right atrium. So right here, do you see this structure? This is called SA node or sinoatrial node, also known as pacemaker of the heart. It's called pacemaker because there are specialized cells. There are specialized cells in the pacemaker, and these cells, they can generate action potential. Okay. Also, we see another group of cells in the inferior part of the right atrium, and these group of cells are called AV node or atrioventricular node. Now, from the AV node, there is a thin branch or a thin yellow line that you can see. That's called AV bundle or atrioventricular bundle. They are also a group of specialized cells. The bundle, the AV bundle, comes down into the ventricle and separates into 2 branches. Do you see that? It separates into right bundle and left bundle, all made up of specialized cells. And then ultimately they terminate into fiber-like structures called Purkinje fibers. Okay, so let's review. We have the 2 atria and the 2 ventricles. In the right atrium, in the posterior and superior side, we see the pacemaker of the heart. At the inferior side of the right atrium, we see the AV node. Coming out of the AV node, we have the AV bundle. The AV bundle moves into the ventricle and divides into the right bundle and the left bundle, which ultimately terminates into Purkinje fibers. And we also mentioned that the heart is autorhythmic. It can generate its own beat by the beating or by the beating of the pacemaker cells. So let's take a look at the electrical conduction system of the heart. Okay. Now listen very carefully. The SA node starts firing electrical impulses. So it starts firing, and the action potential spreads all over the atria. So the action potential spreads all over the atria, and it hits a fibrous skeleton, right? Now, as the action potential spreads all over the atria and hits the fibrous skeleton, remember, most of the impulses die. Most of the impulses die as they hit the fibrous skeleton, because remember, what's the function of fibrous skeleton? It insulates, right? It's an insulator. So most of the impulses die. The only point that holds the impulse is the AV node. The AV node holds the impulse for 0.1 to 0.2 seconds, and then it lets the impulse flow through the AV bundle down into the ventricles. And then the impulse goes via the right and the left bundles and gets distributed into the ventricles via the Purkinje fibers. The Purkinje fibers help spreading of this impulse all over the ventricles. So this is the electrical event, right? So let's review this one more time. The SA node starts firing action potentials. The action potentials spread all over the atria and hit the fibrous skeleton. As it hits the fibrous skeleton, most of the impulses die. The only place that holds the impulse is the AV nodes. Remember, the AV node holds the impulse for about 0.1 to 0.2 seconds. Then it allows the impulse to flow through the AV bundle into the AV bundle towards the ventricles. The impulse now flows along the left and the right bundles and then gets spread all over the ventricle via the Purkinje fibers. This is how the electrical impulse that gets originated at the pacemaker at the SA node gets distributed throughout the heart. And we also see it gets delayed at the AV node. Now, remember one thing, electrical events always precedes mechanical functions. So we will have this electrical event first, followed by mechanical functions. What is a mechanical function are you talking about, Rupa? Well, we have this electrical conductivity, and right after this, we will have the actual contraction of the heart, right? Does your heart contract? Yes, it does. Why? Because there is this electricity flowing. As a result of this electrical impulses, your heart contracts. So your heart contracts in response to the electrical event. So remember one thing, you have the electrical event first, followed by the mechanical contraction. All right. I will stop here and then start with a new